Miami goes into Tallahassee and takes care of business. They take down the Florida State Seminoles, and we're going to break down the action. Now, naturally, a rivalry game started out pretty feisty and pretty intense. This was a battle right off the bat, and Florida State was not going away easy. They were going to fight, and they were going to put up a tough fight for Miami to endure. And the first half was definitely kind of indicative of that, at least the first quarter for sure. Florida State gets off to a 3-0 start, and you thought, okay, this is a good start for them. Let's see what happens in the next couple of drives. And Miami, similar thing. Miami, you felt like, okay, well, they're going to take care of business. They're going to be able to move the ball down the field. You know, CJ Daniels has a touchdown pass from Carson Beck to end the first quarter, had a 47-yard catch earlier in that drive, puts them up 7-3. And then it's when Florida State kind of hurts themselves, right? Castellanos throws an interception, which hurts a drive in which they were moving the ball quite well. And that gives the ball back to Miami, who proceeds to run a flea flicker, finds Malachi Toney for 44 yards, and it's 14-3. Now, not the end of the world, right? It's not the worst thing to happen, but being down 14-3 is kind of difficult if you are Florida State. You just do not have the same type of ability to come back in that type of game. But more on that here in a little bit. You also had Miami kind of making some mistakes. And again, it's a rivalry game, so that's naturally going to happen. But they have a 14-3 lead, and there was a play where they run a quick pass to Malachi Toney, ends up going 52 yards for a touchdown, but called back on an illegal motion. He had, I think it was Keelan Marion going in motion. He starts going downfield a little too soon, and it ends up in a punt. That was a big momentum swing in Florida State's favor. Now they didn't do anything with it, but it was still only 14-3. Then you get into the third quarter, and it was pretty much all Miami. And we really saw the emergence once again of Malachi Toney. Maybe it's not emergence anymore, but you saw Malachi Toney's talent on full display, and that's where things quickly went into Miami's favor. He has a 40-yard touchdown pass from Carson Beck on a 4th and 2, and he catches the pass, and you think, okay, Florida State's not going to be able to get that, but they're hopefully going to be able to tackle him, right? No, Malachi Toney's speed and acceleration are on full display to the point where it felt like there were 3 Florida State defenders around him, and he managed to pull away for a touchdown. And this is a guy who just continues to impress everyone, continues to put up these sensational performances, and you feel really good if you're a Miami fan about what he brings to the table. That was kind of the big question coming into this year, right? The wide receiver position was a question mark, and you didn't necessarily have any guaranteed people that were going to take over. Malachi Toney, a freshman, is really taking one of those spots. So it's 21-3, and Miami's feeling pretty good. Florida State's battling with some things. They're dealing with their starting tackle, their starting right tackle being out. You have a backup tackle in. Felt like Tommy Castellanos at times was just trying to chuck things up and make plays, and that's not what you want to do against the Miami defense. You just don't want to make those kinds of mistakes or make those decisions. It's just not going to end well. And fortunately, it didn't end terribly, but they weren't putting up points. Miami then adds another touchdown to go up 28-3, and it felt like it was all Miami. This was going to be a blowout, and it was going to be just another one where we talk about how the Canes truly just dominated. And then you get to the fourth quarter, and this is the one thing I have a concern right now with Miami. It's felt like every game, and this is just natural, but it's felt like every game there is a point where Miami just almost takes its foot off the gas. It's almost like they have a lapse in intensity. The defense, the offense, everyone. It doesn't feel like they are full throttle. They are just coasting at times. And it hasn't really hurt them because they haven't played a ton of games where they had to worry about that, but they've had that in every game. And I'm very curious how they fix that, because in the fourth quarter, it didn't feel like the game was ever out of it, it didn't feel like Florida State was going to make a comeback and make it interesting, but they gave up 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions, and it was like Florida State just kind of moved the ball pretty efficiently. Now, the final touchdown they score, it's a 5-minute drive, so you took a ton of time off the clock, but it was like Miami just didn't have the intensity, and maybe that's just because everyone's tired, but that is something to keep an eye on with this team. If you want to win a national championship, you clearly have to be able to play 4 quarters, and not it didn't look like people were tired, but it just felt like they weren't dominating. To go up 28-3 and then just kind of nothing else happened is one thing that I'm curious how that will play out if they play a team that has the ability to make a comeback, because Florida State's offense can be explosive. Florida State's offense can be balanced, but it's not a team that's equipped to play in a shootout type of game. They're not equipped to make a 25-point comeback. They're just not built that way. So for Miami to kind of have that, oh, well, we're not going to go full throttle, we're just going to make sure we get to the end, that might be something that has to get addressed, because other teams might be able to do that. Again, the lapse is really where you have the issue with Miami, because Carson Beck for those first 3 quarters looked phenomenal. He looked like he was wheeling and dealing, and having Malachi Toney, CJ Daniels play to that level that they needed to is exactly what you needed from this team. And it looked like they were going to be able to run through Florida State without any issues. And the fact that this game ended 28-22, again, it didn't feel like it was close, but it also tells you that there are things that Miami needs to work on. If you are going to make a run at a national championship, you just can't have those lapses. But Carson Beck, 20 of 27 for 241 yards and 4 touchdowns. Malachi Toney finishes the day 7 catches for 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, really, really good performance from him. The defense was once again a solid group. I think that they played really well through those 3 quarters, and most of the production for Florida State kind of came in those last few drives. So overall, you feel pretty good about that performance, but again, there's always something to work on. If you're Florida State, you kind of look at where do you go from here, because now you are in a much different place than where you started, right? You beat Alabama. That was great, but you have now lost 2 games in a row, and you've lost 2 conference games in a row. That is going to be tough to overcome, especially if you are trying to get to the college football playoff, which you can't really eliminate anybody quite yet, like a Florida State, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough with a loss to Virginia. You have a loss to Miami, and now getting to the ACC championship game is probably your only hope of getting in. Now you're kind of eliminated in that capacity. And again, this is where your offense just wasn't equipped to make that sort of comeback, and it just, you fell behind, and that's really disappointing. But you also know that there are things you could have done better. Now, again, those 2 losses is really where it hurts the most, because the loss to Virginia is probably the worst one. Losing to Miami isn't anything to be ashamed of, but losing to Virginia is really where you felt like that one kind of slipped away from us, and so did their hopes of postseason play in terms of the playoff. They're probably still making a bowl game, but you're probably not making the playoff anymore because of that Virginia loss. You could understand losing to Miami, but losing Virginia is pretty much what was kind of like the dagger. So Florida State, disappointing, but still a much better team than it was last year. And I hope that people don't lose track of that, lose sight of that, because this is still a better team. And that's kind of what we wanted to see from Florida State this year, is that can they be better than what they were last year, and can they be significantly better? And so far, that is the case. For Miami, you win another game. I hope, and I know that Mario Cristobal is going to look at this But my hope is that this is not a team that is just okay with beating their rival. This game should have been much worse in terms of the scoring margin. Miami should have won this game by a lot more. But again, some of those mental mistakes, some of that lapse in intensity where they're not dominating is really where they could get hurt down the road. But still a good win for Miami. Overall, a solid performance. And now they are on to the next one, and their goal of winning a national championship is still very much alive.